Hello and welcome to this edition, and as always gives me a great delight to welcome a very dear friend of mine, Mr. Justin Butzel. Justin is the leading practitioner I know within healthcare and golf, and someone I've learned tremendous amounts from over the recent years. So it's always a delight to really kind of question and kind of discuss with Justin around, I think very, very relevant kind of areas in golf at the moment. I think possibly the biggest subject in kind of health and performance and in understanding humans in recent years has been Bryson. I mean, I'm a huge fan. I think what Bryson's done, in fact, you and I are sat here discussing Bryson. It says, in many ways, kind of says much about the influence he's had. And I really have embraced what he's done. So first of all, Justin, thank you so much for really sharing your thoughts around really the Bryson effect in some ways, possibly the biggest influence on golf since Tiger in '97 or Augusta now, which is mad, I think 24 years ago. So Justin, I'll really discuss, or more Justin will go in particular, really kind of what Bryson's done, maybe add some context to what he's been, the approaches he's taken, and really what kind of significant relevance it's had to his evolution. So Justin, thank you so much as always, and very much looking forward to getting your thoughts, more from a kind of healthcare practitioner around really that Bryson effect.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me. So I mean, I think the first thing to say is I'm not in his team, and I'm always I think it's really important to honour every player and the team they work in, because there are so many talented people out there doing things. So I can't speak on behalf. I don't know all the details, so it'd be wrong of me to make a judgment or b to assume I know the methods and the way they've done it in particular. Clearly, he's done an amazing job of being able to ramp up physiological mechanisms in the body so that he can produce speed and power. It goes without saying. I think the interesting thing for me, the question for me, is less about Bryson in that respect, because he's managing it his way, and that's great. And as I say, I'm not going to make judgment on it. It's more about what are the implications for the industry. So I've been in healthcare for 20 years, been coaching in golf and being on tour since sort of 2009, and obviously we've seen a lot change in that period of time. When I first started out on tour, the players that were in their late 20s, they were just really embracing wanting to have a decent health and performance team around them all the time at events to help them both perform at their best at the event and also periodize what they're doing, their training and managing their technical load outside of the event. I think for the general consumer, that the amateur that might be interested in suddenly going after strength and power, there are obviously pros and cons to this. One, it's great that we can ask people to get involved in health and fitness and promote well-being in that sense, because that's always going to be a great thing. And there's certainly some really good research that demonstrates the importance of strength as a tool for reducing the chance of injury. You don't necessarily reduce injury because it's sport, but reducing those chances. But I think the question more is, when do we deploy these methods, and who are we deploying them with? So if I've got a young gun that has had no medical history, moves really well, is working fantastically well with their swing coach in the sense that they are moving appropriately in the swing to load and unload those forces, then going after building a bigger engine could be a fantastic asset. Equally, if they have movement discrepancies and energy leaks, how we like to describe that technically, if there are compensations in movement, which we see day in and day out when they hit, if we increase the engine, we increase risk. Mm-hmm. So then for me as a health and performance coach, I'm actually making a player potentially worse by doing that, because I built them a bigger engine so they can get their ball speed up, but they're doing it with this micro trauma and this compensation that's going on. And so I've made more problems. And so again, it's really hard to do that on social media. It's why I don't, because it's a bigger conversation. It's not just a quick tweet or Insta post. But I think it's one of the things we've got to have a really intelligent conversation as a team, as coaches supporting that player, to say, given their medical history, is this the right thing to go after? What's the timeline for this? I work with players where we had things like Project 300 and stuff like that, and we took a long-term approach to try and increase that club head speed and ball speed. And it was very much, we periodized our training, the intensity and volume of that training in sync with their technical volume. So when we had a high technical day and they were going to be hitting a lot of balls and there's a lot of neural fatigue being induced by that, we weren't increasing a lot of, creating another stress on the system by putting really heavy training into them. So I think it's really important.
I think kind of, for me, the biggest Bryson effect was actually probably at the weekend of the Players' Championship.
Yeah.
But there's a very famous interview with Rory McIlroy now that, at the time, Rory's probably been the best on his day. When Rory's on his day, if he putts relatively well, good luck trying to beat the guy. He's that good. And if those internal drivers are where they're at, so he's got those intrinsic dynamics where he's so motivated to win, that's a hard guy to beat.
Yeah.
That it's clearly been influenced by Bryson, but I had that very famous interview said he went after speed training and it's been really harmful for him. So that's always that caveat. And I think with social media is good at showing the things that help, but very quickly kind of keep the ones that don't quite help because it's not core to display that. And so Rory gave a great, and I really respect the honesty that he went after speed training to try and catch up to Bryson. It's really disrupted how he moves in his golf swing. Now, 6 months on after taking that approach, he still can't get back to the movement accuracy and the movement quality he had post-speed training. So Bryson's actually influencing his peers now, which the last guy was really Tiger, I guess, before that.
Yeah.
When you've got the best ball striker probably in the last 10 years, perhaps, McIlroy, chasing Bryson, but it's been very harmful for him. So really, I guess the question then is, for younger, maybe aspirational players or even coaches, on that kind of day one, someone walks in, hey, JB, I've been watching Bryson. He is the aspiration now. I want to be like him. Where do we start? What's day one or even second one kind of really look like?
Yeah, so classically, if we keep it really simple, we'd have if we think of it as a pyramid approach and we think about speed and power at the top of that pyramid, before we start to think about periodizing them up there and the kind of training that induces that effect, we're going to be working at the base of the pyramid and making sure, A, they've got requisite mobility, so their freedom of movement is sufficient for what they're trying to achieve in the swing, but also to make sure that's coupled with relevant stability and neuromuscular control, so the timing of that motion and their degrees of freedom and control around that motion is also appropriate. So, and why is that important from a simple standpoint, as I say to juniors and young players that I might support? If you think about wheels on the car and the engine, if I just build you that bigger engine, and that's the idea of building a bigger engine. If I just build you a bigger engine, but we imagine we've got a couple of hip cuffs and a couple of shoulder cuffs, if we want to keep it really simple. If one of those wheels is out, where there's a mobility deficit, a stability deficit, and that's coupled with something else, one wheel is enough to cause havoc. 2 or 3 wheels, we've got a problem, and we've increased our level of risk. So making sure that we periodize people through making sure they've got mobility, stability, strength, endurance. Then we might start to go after more hypertrophy if that's relevant at the right time in the season, then go towards maximal strength, then look at power and speed. We need to be quite seamless in how we try and expose them to these different forms of training, different loads and intensities. And that is a long-term project. If I'm working with a player, I'm going to say this could be an 18-month or two-year project that we're going to periodize you through. And if I try and fast-track it and jump you through certain hoops and take you straight to maximal strength, speed, and so on, I'm the one that's going to hurt them.
I mean, the challenge is, I guess, these days, a bit like Rory, they've instantly gone after speed, and it's been really, really harmful. It's really disrupted how he moves, and he's still trying. He said he's not even back yet to where he was. I guess the challenge is with expectations again with Instagram these days. People expect to click it, get it. I've been on, I clicked it.
For sure.
That's an expectation I get in every session that when people see me, Mark has all the answers. No, Mark has just a lot more questions to ask. And that really is my role, not to give you an answer, just to ask you a lot more challenging questions. They expect, I've got the data, he's going to tell me what they need to do. No, I'm just going to start to explore why you produce those values.
Right.
So, yeah, we can only acknowledge and admire the wonderful influence that Bryson's had. I'm a big fan of that. But do you see any real dark sides attached to that approach of being so into kind of speed and distance that possibly that could be now start to see, in some ways, it's almost the cure doesn't become the disease. We chase these cures, which then start to become a disease because of what then comes in response to speed, distance, speed. It's like a very bad rap song.
Yeah. No, 100%, because if you increase someone's capacity to either produce more force or rate of that force, you often change timing. Mm-hmm. You start to change their kinetics,
which is Rory in some ways. Yeah.
So again, I'm more conservative, and also it's worth saying that most of the work that happens on tour with these guys and girls is really boring. Like, it's not Insta friendly. That we might see some posts out there like, oh, look what they're up to, this is amazing, and naturally it's a natural comparison, and people want to think, well, we need to chase this. But they wouldn't be chasing a lot of what they see with tour players generally with their amazing teams, because a lot of it is very low level, mindful work to ensure healthy adaptation. Like I want to make sure there's I want to have an athlete that can adapt to different circumstances rather than having an adapted athlete that can no longer
in some ways, some intellectual honesty.
Yeah.
I think we've lost that. I mean, it was a great Rory post again several years ago now. Rory using a trap bar with like 10 plates on each side. So the perception, he's lifting heavy. They were 5 kilo plates. So the downside with Instagram or Twitter at the time was he's lifting. This is on the Sunday. I think it was a Sunday at Troon in 2016, the Open Championship, and these 5 or 6 plates on the hex bar. So the perception is he's lifting huge. He had 5 kilo plates on there.
Yeah.
So the 25, probably a 75 kilogram lift he was doing, which is probably close to his body weight. If you kind of think about Rory, I guess 75, 80 kilos maybe.
Right.
And that's the challenge where, we had these Instagrams often a frame in time, where they got to and where they went next, or how they got, you don't know that story.
Yeah,
And
completely.
I'm very aware that there's always a dark side attached to most things. So it's how do we start to mitigate the dark side of the wonderful, wonderful Bryson influence?
Yeah, I think like you just say more generally, I think it's important that we maintain a level of intellectual honesty, like you say, that we're just open, that we don't have all the answers. A lot of what we do is just trying to protect talent as opposed to offer something shiny and go after that shininess. And also the comparison. We know that comparison again is a real problem when it comes to happiness and long-term performance, because we're always switching gears. When I've been most successful with players, it's been because as a team we've treated everything like a randomized controlled trial. In other words, we change one variable, one variable only. So we're not shifting equipment, clothing, training regimes, the way we approach sleep hygiene, nutritional modulation, all that stuff. We're changing one thing, we test it, we see the outputs on that, whether it be through lab testing or through looking at ongoing data like HRV and so on. And then we can start, by doing that, it's very empowering for the player because they have ownership. They realize that one variable made a demonstrable effect on their performance. Whereas the moment we change obviously more than one thing, it's now observational. It's not a randomized controlled trial. We really don't know. And so I think it's really important that as coaches, we can have those quite difficult conversations with our players when they're wanting to go after these things. And I think generally that doesn't make it quite as Insta-friendly, but I think it makes it far more enriching for everyone.
I think a big one for me is let's have that annoying discussion today or very bad one in 12 months' time. Let's have that slightly irritable where you go,
for sure.
Don't I do a nap? You go and go, do you know what? Yeah, probably JB's right. I need to look at this. Or let's ignore that discussion in 6 months' time when my wrist is burst and my spine's in a bad way. And we say, well, what do we say now? We didn't say these 6 months ago.
Exactly.
It's a big one. And I think that's where I think Bryson's been a great intrigue. I think what's attracted so much attention is obviously his distance is just spectacular.
It's unreal,
I say that with great admiration on every level, but he's improved all areas of his game.
Yes.
But unfortunately, what they've looked at in recent times is that because it's cool, it's neat, club at speed, you can get 200 mile plus ball speed now, but he's looked at
his putting
his
data and
his emotional control, his behaviours, the way he moves through Chris Coleman, so many wonderful things he's done.
Right.
So again,
and
how do you almost make that very cohesive? So again, I've been blessed to be around you for many years. That there's always been, I'm trying to think, maybe one session ever you and I, which has been 3 of us. There's normally many people in the room as well. How do you manage those people around you so there becomes a voice, not voices? And that's one thing I'm always very aware of, that when I've got coaches, players, parents, sometimes physiotherapists, conditioning coaches, how do I deliver my information so it's in a global language to all, not
you have a tough job like that sometimes.
How do you kind of manage that where it becomes it's a discussion, not discussions you have with those teams?
Yeah, I think it starts with vulnerability. I think it starts with realizing that everyone's got an important role to play, so no one voice should dominate. So everyone should be free to contribute, even if we're wrong, because we have a collective mission that we're trying to do X.
I guess who decides who's wrong though? Is it?
I think it's born out of a really honest discussion.